Hi everyone, I hope you're well. So there's been several times that I think I have essentially defended metal or metalheads in this channel, or I like to think that I've done that at least in different videos. But at the same time, I sometimes do feel like there's things that I have to admit are somewhat of a problem, or that I have noticed as being somewhat of a problem. Since the Astroworld incident, I've seen a few comments, and I mean, by a few I mean actually quite a lot, and apparently very popular sentiments regarding or by metalheads that I just don't think are right, and I just want to mention them because I think it's healthy to just be somewhat critical of groups that you are a part of, even if you do like them or you're part of them or what have you. And what I'm referring to is this idea that I've seen in a lot of comments by metalheads. I specifically went recently to the punk rock MBA channel, or Fane McKenty, his personal, I guess, side channel, where he talks about this. And interestingly, my issue is not even that much with this video, because I don't think it does what I'm gonna talk about. I don't think it does that a lot in this video, but all of the top comments and the general sentiment among the commenters, and I know that, you know, his commenters and his audience doesn't necessarily reflect metalheads as a whole, but I have seen similar comments coming from elsewhere in other videos where metalheads are there and they mention this tragedy of Astroworld. There seems to be this narrative, right, among a lot of these comments, very upvoted comments, right? So it's obviously not an unpopular sentiment among people of at least his audience and quite a lot of other people at least. There's this general sentiment: this would never happen at a metal concert because we're this way, we're like this, we're like that. And I think that behind that, effectively, there is a fundamental misunderstanding of what a crowd crush or a human crush is in the first place. The most mentioned thing, and all of these anecdotes are constantly stating, oh, I once fell, once I got injured at a metal concert, but everyone, picked me up. Everyone constantly says to pick each other up. And the implication here, which is very strange to me, why is that even relevant for what happened in Astroworld? What happened is not just like, oh, people just saw each other dying and they didn't care about it and just kept, trampling over each other, whatever. That's not really how that works. A human crush, the people who are, suffocating you are actually being suffocated as well. Everyone in this crush is being crushed themselves and also crushing others. So it's not like this happened simply because all these people, this public or this audience, have this mentality of, oh, I only come here for myself and I don't care that I'm fucking other overs or whatever. Yeah, there may be some people like that, I don't know. But my point is that saying that this narrative that this wouldn't happen at a metal concert because we are more caring about each other and we have more of a sense of community isn't accurate. But also because it's effectively blaming the public for their own injuries, their own trauma, their own deaths. And even if that is not the intention, because otherwise what would be the relevance of mentioning that you have once, fell down while moshing and someone picked you up? What does that have to do with anything? I also want to mention the fact that that is not completely accurate, given that human crushes have actually happened before in rock shows, rock concerts before. And of course, as you might imagine, that happened mostly at the time where metal and rock were at their peak in terms of commercial success or popularity. As you might have heard of, in 1988, there was a human crush at a Guns N' Roses concert. Just so you know, I'm not trying to compare the situation to Astroworld specifically, because it doesn't seem that in any of these circumstances the artists themselves knew or could have done anything about it or were responsible themselves. So I'm not trying to imply that these are equivalent, but what I'm trying to say is that I think a lot of people are unfairly blaming or implying that the audience is to some degree as well to blame for the incidents, as you might have seen in those comments that I put up. This also happened in AC/DC with an AC/DC concert in 1991, and in 2000 during Pearl Jam's concert at the Orange Stage, on 30 June 2000, also a crash occurred. Also, specifically for metal, a stampede, or more accurately, a human crash happened in Indonesia. It was a show for the band B-Side by from Indonesia. They are melodic death metal. They are wrongly called punk here in this page. I just wanted to point out that this has happened in metal shows before, and we're not above that. It's not something that we're just like ethically, morally above. And that's why I wanted to point it out, because it seems to me that a lot of people just jumped to say that, oh look, we're better than this, just took this tragedy and said, oh look, this would never happen with us because we're better than that, morally, culturally, and in all these ways. And as you have probably figured out, most of these instances happened precisely at the peak of the popularity of these bands. So of course Guns N' Roses were really popular in the 80s, Pearl Jam, technically the year 2000 is actually part of the 90s apparently. So they were of course very popular then, and AC/DC was very popular in this time as well. This is more, I think, about just the combination of the sheer number in the crowds, and also of how the organization happens, rather than how rowdy, or I guess you could say uncultured in terms of mosh etiquette or what have you is. As a lot of these people are claiming, oh, it's because these kids don't know how to mosh, or they don't know how to mosh properly, they don't take care of each other, they don't care, yada yada. But it's also taking responsibility, I think, away from both the artist Travis Scott and his organization, the organization of the actual event. The fact that a lot of security wasn't even trained, or they were negligent, or there was just generally a lot of negligence in the organization. The fact that it was overbooked, and it was obviously going to be overcrowded at a point where it was beyond safety standards, as you know, of Travis Scott patterns and his history of trying to incite crowds to do things that are unsafe, and all of these things happening at once. I mean, that has nothing to do with the actual people who went there and just happened to be in the front or near the front doing nothing to purposefully injuring each other or whatever, those people being nearly crushed or crushed. If people at the back are pushing to the front, they probably don't know collectively yet that there's people dying or close to dying in the front. They only know that when they have been told by other people who go there specifically to tell them, hey, let's back down because there's people in the front who are being crushed or suffocated. This is something that could really happen in any place that is overcrowded enough and that has a organization that is so careless about safety that it would allow something like this to happen. And I don't like this idea that these kids or teenagers, adults, because I have to remind you that the oldest person to die in this event was 27. So a lot of these people who died were teenagers. There's a 9-year-old in a coma. I mean, what is the point of trying to act like... And what is just the point of the first... I understand that the first thing that you might want to think in a situation like this is, could this happen in my circle of people, in my social circle or my group or whatever? And you might think, no, because metalheads are like this and this would never happen in a metal concert. Maybe it wouldn't, because maybe those shows aren't quite as extremely crowded as something like Astroworld was, which I must remind you was quite large. And even though metal and hardcore shows and stuff like that, they do get quite full, they do get quite crowded, maybe it isn't quite to the same extent, Maybe there's other things to attribute this to that have nothing to do with whether or not the community cares about each other, or are mature, or this and that and the other, or they have a culture of this and that and the other. I don't see how you can act like this happened because these teens just didn't care about each other's lives and just decided to purposefully crush each other for fun or what have you, when aside from the rowdiness, this event, not this event, but this phenomenon of human crushes happens in all kinds of events that are crowded, and they have happened before several times throughout history. And it's not always in music festivals. It has happened before in sporting events, in concerts, or by other different types of artists, in any other event where there are huge crowds that are not well organized. The event is not well organized, or situations where people are trying to flee, escape from something, or go towards something all at the same time, and therefore the crush happens. So I fail to see what this idea of metalheads picking each other up when a mosh pit forms has anything to do with this situation. I mean, maybe tangentially related, and truthfully I don't really see it as something that could never happen in a metal concert. I've been in a couple of shows myself, not that many, but a couple of times I have been near the front, and I have been quite... I meant to say that I was pinned in place because of how tightly packed the crowd is at the front oftentimes. And at several points, especially when a mosh opens up and of course you have to make space, it does get quite tight in there, you know. And I don't think before I've ever felt like I've been in you know, a strong danger of dying. But something like that could happen if you just upped the negligence a little bit, and if maybe the artist didn't care about what's going on in the front or going on in the crowds or what have you, which of course is what happened in this situation, both by the staff, the people who were supposed to take care of these issues, security and all these things, and of course the artists as well. All of these people failed the audience. It wasn't the audience who decided that they didn't care, or that, you know, they didn't care about each other's safety. People were calling, hey, there's people who are dead here, she's dead, yada yada. If you look at those horrible videos where people are dying and being pulled out, everyone around them is trying to call attention to the fact that they're dying. Clearly the issue is not, oh, look at these young children in this new generation who listen to hip-hop, they don't care about each other, they don't care about each other's lives. In my times, in my country, in my this and that, in my community, this doesn't happen. I mean, really? I don't know what's the point of acting like we are above that, especially because if we all think we're above that, I think that could also prove to be harmful in the long run, because if you get this false sense of insecurity, you are less likely sometimes to see danger happening. And these kinds of situations can really happen in any sort of crowd. It's not about the attitude, it's not about the generation, it's not about the culture and yada yada. This happens all over the world, in all kinds of different events and situations, like I've been saying. So why do we have to add this sort of moral or cultural issue to these crowds, these people who are the victims of this situation, really? Even the ones who didn't die probably have some sort of trauma, survivor's guilt, or something of the sort, or will go on to develop something like that. And honestly, it's just not very respectful, and I wish that I didn't have to see people who I have something in common with reacting this way to a tragedy of this type. Now, of course, I have to say as well, I don't think this is necessarily the most popular take among metalheads regarding this situation, this tragedy, and also I know for a fact that not all metalheads feel this way about this, and that it's not necessarily such a common thing. But again, the fact that these comments were so strongly echoed, so supported, and all of these things just makes me see that, you know, it's not exactly an unpopular opinion to have. Again, these things happen everywhere, and it's not a generational thing either. I mean, I'm sorry, but this has been happening for a very long time. You can look at there's a whole Wikipedia webpage that has a list of human crushes throughout history, and they have been happening for a while. All generations, all cultures, all nationalities. And again, I think that it's especially important because this narrative gives less of a weight to the real problems behind it, which were negligence and what the artist himself was doing, which again, I cannot state enough how irresponsible it has been of him. This pattern, these videos that have surfaced of him encouraging people to do things that are dangerous and that could have them paralyzed or killed. And in one case, one did. Way before this, there was one case of a man who, or maybe a teenage man, I'm guessing, that was in his concert, and he was pushed from a second or third floor, and he went on to be paralyzed. And I think it's so strange and horrible in reality that that wasn't the calling, that wasn't the wake-up call for Travis Scott that it should have been. That wasn't the point where he went, oh, you know, maybe I should stop that. It took something like this for him to care at all. So yeah, I know that this is sort of a ranty video and I haven't been uploading in a while, and you know, I was waiting, I was wanting my first video after this break to be the Senjutsu review, but I haven't gotten to it yet. I have been pushing it back so much, and I'm sorry for that if you have been waiting for it. But yes, I will have it up, and you know, eventually I will have it up. Just wanted to get this one done because I feel a bit more viscerally towards this because of all these comments that I've been seeing. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I can I'll tell you that I hope you enjoy this video, because it's not exactly something enjoyable, but I hope you did get something out of this, and I'll see you in the next video.